So in this video, I'm talking about watch design. Now, I should have waited until I was in more of a studio setting so that you could see the video better because I could have shot it in horizontal like this. And but on this occasion, it's very difficult to actually hold the camera in this position. It's much more easy if I keep it in this position, and hopefully that hasn't messed up the video. I suppose I will have to check. Hold on. So I just checked that part of the video, and it put me on the side. So we'll have to stay in this perspective. And if you're on a smartphone, this will be fine. But on the screen you'll get the envelope thing. Anyway, watch design. Now, for the last several years, actually, from when the idea entered my mind, I started sketching watches. Now, I look such a mess, sorry. I started sketching watches, not because I thought to myself, I know what I'm doing and I've got this worked out, but I wanted to get into the practice of creating drawings of watches that then computer-aided designers could take from me and then put into the CAD software, and then we could start tinkering about with the dimensions and then add colors and that sort of thing. And I really respect the CAD drivers, the guys that can operate this software, because it is unbelievably invaluable, because what they can also do is export a file from their designs that allow the computer-aided machines to machine the case and bracelet parts, for example. So I wanted to start off with a concept that was sketched, and then the sketch go into a 3D model and computer-aided design software, and then we're able to manipulate the size, dimensions, colors and materials, and the aesthetics of it. And in that process, literally starting off by designing the case, designing the dial, the handset, and of the mechanical watch, but also doing the very same with the digital watch, you start to appreciate or understand how difficult it really is. And I know that, and I encourage anyone, if you think designing a watch is easy, pull out a piece of paper and a pen, draw a circle or a square, and start designing a watch face, and you will find it unbelievably difficult. Just try it. You will literally stumble, at the circle and the first indices. You'll literally start thinking to yourself, wow, this is hard. Now, it's equally as hard designing the digital face. And what technology allows us to do today is, so there's a lot more scope with the design of a digital display. You can literally have it LED, it's simulated LED. You can have an e-paper based display, and then all the different variations of e-paper, then LED and all the different variations of LED. So there are many options there. Very quickly you stumble into power usage, and that becomes an engineering problem or a constraint that you have to deal with, that then has an impact on your decision making with respect to the digital display. If I just pop back to the mechanical display for a moment, the exact same problem exists with movement, because if you are literally starting scratch building a movement, you need to face down about 10 million pounds of R&D before you can even take yourself very seriously if you think you're going to start making a movement. So you end up looking at the movements that exist already, which takes you to Switzerland, and you're going to find out that it's very expensive. You have to beg the Swiss providers to actually want to sell you a movement anyway. And so you need to base your watch around a movement that you have access to. Now, if you go to Switzerland, Japan, for example, because really the only two places that make movements are Japan and Switzerland. Of course, China makes movements, but they are more clones that you have access to. There are some independent movements, but once again, accessing those is very difficult. But being China, you probably can access them. But really, the two places that make movements are Japan and Switzerland. Now, of course, Daniels in the UK makes movements, but this is very high end. And I don't believe that he makes them for third parties. So someone like me has to really consider Switzerland and Japan, what's available there. So with a digital watch, you have almost the same challenges as the mechanical movement, because you're having to design around what's technically available. Now, if we go back to the digital for a moment, so like you have mechanical constraints, you have digital constraints around power consumption. And I suppose the analogy is very similar to the power consumption of a mechanical movement, because these days, the power reserve, so that's the amount of energy in the spring that goes to the escapement. What's really normal these days is to have a power reserve that hits the 60-hour mark, 60 to 72 hours. So you're heading, a good 3 days. Now, it used to be 48, about 48.50, which is 2 days. But I think the general expectation today, and what many movement manufacturers have been designing and making movements to, is this 3-day power reserve. And so these are for automatic watches. You will often find an automatic watch being presented today, Swiss made, towards the high end, is definitely going to have this 3-day power reserve. Now, if it's not automatic, it's and it's manual wind, you really do need this 7-day power reserve, or IWC's up to 10-day power reserve. Now, a mechanical watch offering a 7-day power reserve, that is one heck of a engineering technical feat, because trying to smooth out the power release of a mainspring or mainsprings, to be the same as it goes through the regulation over a 7-day period is one heck of an engineering feat. Obviously, that sort of thing over in the digital is much easier because it's all electric anyway. But the level of complexity and the level of difficultness and the level of cost, is very high, both with the mechanical and the digital. And what I'm finding is that making the digital movement from scratch is looking more expensive than the mechanical, for what I'm trying to do, because getting a chip designed has a 6-figure cost attached to it. That's just the design, and then to manufacture hundreds of them in one go, you're dealing with minimum order quantities, and you've got a 6-figure cost right there. So building your own chip is unbelievably expensive. Now, originally, I did actually approach Casio and Seiko. I wondered if there was a way around this, a way I could access their movements, their chips, and they very politely said, no way. And I could see that there was no way I was going to get hold of their movements or their technology. And from a business point of view, I fully understand why. Now, you can get hold of digital movements that are third party, that are generic. But then you are really held to ransom by the display that's on offer and the functionality that is presented inside the module. So just like mechanical, you are building a digital watch around the design and the constraints of a movement. So designing a watch, again, if you put design to the side for a moment, you've got all these technology challenges around the movement if you are starting at the beginning and you are wanting a new movement. So a new movement basically means, £10 million worth of investment right from the beginning, and even then there's no guarantees, especially for mechanical. Digital, if you are starting from very scratch, you think £10 million, should cover it, but some of the numbers that I'm looking at are, in the hundreds of thousands for sure. And this is very small scale, and I don't really know if that's going to end up producing a movement that's going to do everything that you'd want it to do. It is possible, but it's the specification that you're wanting. And the analogy is almost identical with the mechanical movement. The better you want the electronic movement to be, so you want to integrate Bluetooth, long battery life, solar power, or even an automatic electric generating watch. All these technical, nice things to have, they all cost a fortune at the research and development stage and building that module. So it is a challenge. Now, going through the process is very interesting. I'm actually very interested in designing and having built a module that has a little bit of scope in it, so I can shove it into different case designs, but ultimately it's covering all the bases. And I also wanted to use a solar recharge, so I wanted it to be solar and also Bluetooth enabled. And so, many people immediately might think, hold on, that sounds a lot like a smartwatch. And I very purposely don't want to make a smartwatch, because a smartwatch movement is attached to, and that functionality lends itself to disposable tech, to technology that has a specific sort of life cycle. And I don't want to do that. I want to follow a Casio and Seiko and all the other LCD watches out there. And I want to make something that has a much longer longevity. So the build spec and the build quality of the electronic movement is highly important, because I want it to last for decades and not years. But then you do have to really consider that the battery, at some point, the technology that we have today does need to be replaced. But I suppose it's almost identical to mechanical watches having to be serviced and cleaned, every decade or so, and which involves them being taken apart. What I'm wanting with this digital watch is that after 20 years, you only need to replace the rechargeable battery then. So it's identifying a battery technology that has the potential to last 20 years, and the solar power and the electronics are going to just function fine for that length of time. And sure enough, it is very possible. But the R&D and the components are just very expensive, and they're expensive to manufacture, but the research and development aspect of it is very, very expensive, because you're talking about very high grade engineering here. But anyway, this is the journey that I'm on. And I don't mind telling people I've been heavily inspired by G-Shock in particular, and I've also been inspired by every other watch company out there, and in particular Pebble. Now, Pebble, I believe, was sold years ago now to Fitbit, and Fitbit, I think, basically buried that brand name. And they probably took the technology that they wanted to. But Pebble produced a smartwatch that was both iOS and Windows compatible. So you could have an Apple or a Windows machine, and you could configure the watch that way. And this was a very affordable smartwatch. But what they did and how they did it, I took a lot from that. and they were able to get a module put together that did what they wanted it to do. But again, it was a smartwatch. It had a short shelf life really, and they weren't designed really to last a long time or be high-end luxury. But I've taken a lot from them. But once again, G-Shock and their full metal range and their Frogman range has really made me think about longevity and how long these things last, especially when I keep coming across G-Shocks that are 20 years old, and they've had their battery replaced. They're on the third battery, and the thing still functions, and it's literally 20 years old. So that is telling you that G-Shocks do have legs, and these aren't the full metal ones. Who knows how long they are going to last, but I think they've easily got 2 decades, 3 decades in them, that is for sure, because I have been looking at some of the original Frogmans, and they're 30 years old now and they're still working. So we know that digital watches do last, and actually just flip that over to a mechanical watch. You look at any mechanical watch that really is 30 years old and has been worn, and it will look a little tired. And, people, for the people that own the glamorous, expensive stuff, the minute that they find out that the watch might be, worth something, they do stop wearing it, and then they shove it in a drawer or a safe, thinking that it's going to hold value, and it probably will. But the thing is, any watch that's 30 years old is going to look a little bit tired, and it's going to look like it's 30 years old. And a part of that is very cool and very desirable, so that's nothing to be worried about. But once again, I wanted to build in a lot of longevity and a lot of life and into a wristwatch, but also have a timeless design. And if you want timeless designs, you don't have to look much further than Rolex or G-Shock, because really the Rolex Submariner, that design has changed, but it hasn't. But the general look of it hasn't changed, in 50 years. And look at the G-Shock Square, that is 40 years old. I mean, what's great about the G-Shock Square, the design hasn't changed at all. It's only the display and the technology. The Rolex Submariner, it has changed a little bit in its design, but ultimately it's the same thing. Anyway, so this video was really to talk about watch design, and you can probably see, I've only just touched on a few things that are, massive, bits of effort in the process of designing a wristwatch. It's unbelievable. I'm 2 years in, and what I've learned and the challenges that I'm now aware of are enormous. And initially you think it's going to cost this much, and then when you get into the weeds, you find out that the effort required is much greater, and that basically translates to it being very, very expensive. Anyway, it is super. I'm really enjoying it, and hopefully I'm going to have some designs at some point. And I only want to show you designs that I think are super cool, and I want to be able to explain them, and I want to be able to know that they have legs. That's what I'm doing. And I'm also in the process of designing a mechanical watch and a digital watch. And I can tell you, it's really, really hard. And even when I've got them designed, I'm not going to be bothered about showing you them, because if they're copied, that's just a compliment, really. I think these days homage watches are really compliments to the things that they are imitating. But I know, and it's very hard to make a watch. It really is. Anyone that thinks you can just set up a watch company and produce a good watch, that's just not possible. And I think all the evidence is out there. You can just think of these watch companies that were set up overnight, and that they're very generic. That's not a brand That's not a brand or a new company that is going to have legs, not really. To make a successful brand, to build a successful new watch, it requires massive amounts of effort, research and development, and loads of time and money going into that. Anyway, I hope I haven't driven you all crazy. And I know I've just touched the surface, but I need to put the camera down now. And I hope this is interesting at the very least, and no doubt speak again soon.